Okay, this video might be a little jumpy. I'm going to try to shoot it all together, and then, yeah, I'm going to have to edit some because it's going to be long. We're talking about part 2, chapter 4 of Russon, and this is where it gets really serious, right? This is where we start getting down to the nitty-gritty, as it were. Okay, so in the second part of the text, it's important that you understand those aspects. I'm not going to be going through them in any detail because you can go back and watch those videos where I try to explain as much as possible what the other themes are. And throughout it, we've been talking about how the other themes are related to others. It doesn't, I mean, obviously the embodiment, my embodiment, does have something to do with who I am by myself, but it's hugely important how I'm seen by others. In order to get self-esteem, I want to be seen by others in a particular way. At first, those others are my family. I want to carry myself in a way. If I'm a little girl, I don't want to have my, be lifting up my skirt because then my mom is going to be running over and pushing it down. Or, oh, sit like this. Or, oh, you're a girl, you have to, protect your whatever. I learn how to behave, how to carry myself in the context of that family initially, and then in the context of the wider society. And there's a transition that takes place there, and that's what we're going to be talking about as we're talking about how human beings develop a sense of self. That's what what chapter 4 is all about. Okay, so slide 3. Very important to be thinking about how we as human beings become who we are by playing roles. I don't know if you took the time to watch that Denial of Death video. It's called Denial of Death, The Quest for Immortality. Very, very good video. And in it, there's a pretty clear social psychological explanation for how we become the human beings we are in the context of groups. I'll be talking about that a little bit later. What I get by being given, a prison guard uniform is a role. What I get by learning how to be a man in American society is a role, right? I'm given a role to play, and initially that role was in the family. Initially, I'm given a sense of myself as good son or good brother, right? We saw this one prisoner, I think it was in that version of the video, in the Stanford prison experiment, who has a total mental breakdown, and they take him out because he's flipping out after only like 48 or 72 hours, and he's outside, and they've all been chanting, prisoner 819 is a bad prisoner, prisoner 819 is a bad prisoner, prisoner 819 is the reason my cell is a mess, just chanting this over and over again, and he's just so beat down that they let him out, he's crying, and then he says, I have to go back in, I have to go back in. And Dr. Zimbardo's like, what do you mean? And he's like, I have to go back in and show them I'm not a bad prisoner. And Zimbardo's like, you're not a prisoner. You're Joey. You're not prisoner 819. That was just an experiment, and you're done with it now. And he's like, no, I have to go back in. I have to prove myself. So his self-esteem got linked to a role that he'd only been playing for 72 hours, and it was completely arbitrary based on a coin toss. All right? So we can identify ourselves with groups and communities and the roles that we play very, very quickly. And it's important to understand how that works. Okay. So on the first page of the book, you can, or the first page of the chapter, rather, on 51, it's a lot of philosophy talk. You don't have to pay too much attention, but then those last couple of paragraphs help us understand how objects, we're always dealing with objects, right? And there's a particular kind of object that we seek to deal with that forms the substance of our lives. The real substance of our lives is dealing with those objects that are also subjects, right? They're these things that we see, that we recognize, that our judgments, our interpretations, our stance toward them, what we want from them, it's not fully definitive. These others that are the specific object that are other people, other subjects. They're objects that are subjects. They're objects of our attention, but they're also looking back at us. They're looking at the world. They're making their own judgments. And so they're a very peculiar kind of object with whom we have to learn how to deal. So why is it so important to learn that why are these others such an important deal? It's because of my understanding of myself. So on 52, he describes how we take ourselves to matter as a source of self-esteem so that we can become happy and live the best lives possible. We matter because we're the being through which anything would matter, right? Football only matters if people care about it. The only difference between football and rugby in America is that people don't care about rugby. Otherwise, rugby players would make millions of dollars instead of making basically none, right? So it's because of our attention that things matter. It's because of us as each individual deciding this matters, this is valuable, I'm going to spend time and money and effort on this. That's why anything in the world has value. It's because we value it. That's what makes us matter. Unfortunately, I encounter this other thing that I might want to say it doesn't matter, but then it says back to me, no, I do matter, and I matter more than you. Or I might want to say about a third thing, an object, football, right? Football, it doesn't matter at all. But then there's these millions of people, maybe my own father, saying, no, it really does matter, and you're an idiot. What a pussy for not liking football. What are you, not a man? You got to like football. What's the matter with you, right? And now I've got this kind of pressure on me because I no longer have the definitive answer about what's meaningful and valuable, about what matters in the world. A challenge is presented just insofar as I contact others. And we've seen that that contact with others is essential to our embodiment. Just insofar as we're being with a body, we're in contact with, that we're open to other perspectives on the world. Now, in part 2, around page 52 and 53, we start to see how those others pose a kind of threat to themselves. Okay, slide 6, right. Right, I as the cogito on slide 6, right? I'm the cogito. I am what the center of the universe, because I mean it's just like rocks falling and plants growing and animals fighting one another until there's consciousness, right? This event of human consciousness, which so many theological people, including Descartes, believe couldn't have happened without a God. This amazing event of human rational consciousness, figured by the cogito as the new foundation for all human knowledge, human identity, and the universe itself. It's all centered around consciousness, but I discover that I'm not just I think, therefore I am. He thinks. And she thinks, and he thinks, and she thinks, and my dad thinks, and this little kid thinks, and everybody, and this prisoner thinks, and this prison guard thinks, and this cop is looking at me, right? And this racist is looking at me. There's all these different consciousnesses with their own judgments of things. I'm no longer the center of the universe. I have to navigate. I want her to like me. I want the boss to like me. I want to like this guy. I like this person, but I want to pretend not to, right? I have to navigate this world of judgments of other people and their opinions and what they think. That's a serious deal, and that's the substance of human life. And so, slide 7 on page 54, we encounter in the other, we encounter our own deficiency. And he argues there that we can't simply overpower the other person and make them do or make them think what we want. One of the primary things we can't force someone to think a specific way about is ourselves. So we encounter all those judgments. One of those important aspects of those judgments is their judgments of me. I want to say I'm important because look at this thing I accomplished. I built this paper mache Don Quixote thing. I don't know why I thought. And he comes up and he's like, dude, that's totally gay. You're totally gay for doing art. You should do football. And I'm like, oh crap. My accomplishments don't matter, right? Maybe my dad hates the kinds of paintings that I do. He wants me to play football, right? And so what matters to me, what I value is negotiating with these others, specifically my own accomplishments, who I am, and whether or not I matter as a person, right? Okay, slide 9. This first group of others that we most want to think a certain way about us and that whose opinions we have to navigate is obviously our family. The first thing is I want my dad to be proud of me. I want my mom to love me, etc. And so Russon on 56 and following, 56 through 58, a lot of discussion of the relationship between the parents and the children in terms of this sense of the battle of the wills, right? I want my interpretation to be valued, but initially as a child, my interpretations of what's valuable and what matters and what's a good bedtime and whether or not we should eat ice cream and cake for dinner, all of those interpretations are just, my parents just tell me, no, you're just wrong about this, right? And I try to find ways to get yes. Like, I can't control my bedtime, really. They put me in bed, but I can control whether or not I eat certain kinds of foods. I have a friend, obviously, my wife is pregnant, so we're thinking about having a baby. I have a friend who's got a 13-month-old who has now refused to eat anything that he can't eat with his own hands. And if you try to put a spoon, he refuses to eat. So no more soup, no more applesauce, no more spaghetti. Only things that he can grab with his hands and put in his mouth. This is him saying, no, I want to be self-contained. I want to have an identity. He's trying to express his will and express his individuality already at 13 months, right? And this is what children are doing with that phase of no, 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 right? They take whatever they can and they make demands. Russon talks about yelling. Can't really stop a kid from yelling if he wants to yell. Peeing? How are you going to stop a kid that pees to piss you off? What are you going to do? Pinch it? No, it's not going to work, right? There's no way to stop them. And so they find these ways where they can exercise their own will and their own control, and their will and control is then in a battle of wills with their parent, and what they're battling over is the sense of self around these interpretations of what is proper behavior. The parents try to control the child pushes the limits, etc. This is a very important back and forth. So on slide 10, page 58, Russon is explaining why he chooses that parent-child example, but he says, I don't want you to think that this is limited. A lot of human relationships have this structure, and this is where we get on 58 and 59, this account of the abusive relationship, and that's one of the things I want to talk about because I have a lot of insight into it, and I think it's really, really important. So, what I need for self-esteem is for the people around me to tell me, Jesse, you are great. You're a great teacher, you're a great father, you're a great lover, you're a great husband, you're a great whatever, martial artist, musician, all the things that I do. I need those things to be valued by others, and I'll explain who those others are, because it's not just anybody. If you think it's just anybody, you end up trying to be a celebrity and you're a conformist and it's bad. Okay, so one of the ways that human beings try to get this is what we might think of as a mean girls phenomenon. Right? Where we beat everyone else down and we try to stay at the top. So we get a sense of self-esteem by putting others down, right? We put others down and say, you're not important. You aren't important. You should worship me because I and my judgment is more important than yours. I'll tell you when we're going out and when we're staying home and eating ice cream and what parties we're going to and what we're going to dress and what's in and what's out and who's cool and who's not. And my decisions rule the school, okay? This doesn't just happen in high school, this also happens in abusive relationships. Most of the time, it's a guy that's the abuser. This is not always the case, as you notice on slide 11. All this is happening on 58, 59, and somewhat on to 60. Russon is briefly discussing this structure. I want to spend a little more time on it. If you've seen Saving Silverman, it's a woman doing it to a man and just beating down his self-esteem, cutting him off from his friends and controlling him. But most of the time in the real world, most of the time, not all the time, it's a man controlling a woman. And I've got some video for you to watch on this that's truly unbelievable on slide 12. You might want to click on that and take a look at it. Okay, so what's going on in these relationships? The guy beats down his girlfriend or spouse's, we'll say spouse's, self-esteem so that she comes to completely rely on him for her identity, for her sense of self. So he is now able to completely control her. Now, what does he gain? Obviously, he gains an enormous amount of control in the relationship. Why? Because she ceases to have any respect, any valuing of her own interpretations, like her interpretation of where they go on vacation, her interpretation of whether they should go visit her sister or whether they should go to the Super Bowl or something that he wants to do. His interpretation of what car to buy and how to spend their extra money and when they have sex and what kind of sex they have and what they do with their free time. He gets to control and who makes dinner, right? And how she should treat him. All that stuff, he gets to control that because he's beaten down her sense of self so that she doesn't trust her own judgment. Her powers of interpretation, she doesn't esteem them. She doesn't value her own powers of interpretation because she's come to believe what he's told her. So what does he do? He cuts her off from her friends. He cuts her off from her family. And he seeks to control her. I have an uncle that did this to my aunt. He bugged her. He had friends that were like she had friends that were like women's lib type, and he refused to let her see them because they were a bad influence on her, basically telling her, you don't have to take this, right? Have a little confidence, stand up for yourself, fight back, all the stuff he didn't want her hearing. He cut her off from those things by he found out when she was going to go see this girl and put a bunch of spikes in the driveway behind her car and buried it under leaves. She backed over these spikes and flattened her tires, at which point she called the cops and he got arrested because she didn't know he'd done it. She was just like, oh my God, somebody sabotaged my car. Well, the whole thing comes out. He has to go to anger management. Our whole family finds out that he's been this incredibly controlling asshole this entire time. And the whole goal was to cut her off from her family, my mom, which is her sister, and all of her friends, so that she has no support group, right? So she comes to completely rely on him and can't leave. And then he gets all that control. And in that control, what she is implicitly saying is, you are more important than me. Your judgments are better than mine. Your goals in life are more important than my goals. I exist to support you because you're the main character. You're the hero. The story is about you. I'm only here to support you. I'm less important than you. Right? And isn't that what we wanted? Right? Isn't that what human beings are seeking? Is this sense that we matter in the world? And so maybe the abuser's right. Well, Russon doesn't think so, right? On slide 13 and 14 and 15, I talk about why this doesn't work as a proper structure for a relationship. There are two reasons. One he's very explicit about. The other one I'm kind of reading between the lines and from conversations with him. Okay, first problem. On the bottom of 59, he says that there's an inherent contradiction here. The abuser's claim is, I don't care what you think, right? You are just a girl. You're just a woman. Women can't think for themselves is the line, as the title of that Maury Povich bit, right? You can't think for yourself. Your judgment doesn't matter, so you have to just listen to me. That's what he says. That's what he does to her. But his whole goal is to get her to interpret him as the most important one. His whole goal is to get her judgment to say, you're the most important one. So while explicitly he's saying her judgment doesn't matter, in his actions, in his needing her, he shows that he in fact absolutely relies on her judgment and interpretation as the central most important thing in their relationship. So there's an inherent contradiction there. And this is what it means when you see in those guys' faces that they are deeply insecure, right? These guys are not confident people. They desperately need a weak person to control. So they need that other person. They're not self-confident and controlled and in charge. They're absolutely desperately. And so when she threatens to leave him, he'll be like, I'll kill you and then I'll kill myself, and he'll get desperate and violent. I mean, if he really didn't care about her, as he claims to, then he would just let her go. I don't care about her. She can just go. But that's not what happens. They cling because they have a desperate need for that other person. So there's an inherent contradiction in this. They can't get that self-esteem from it because, for the second reason, on slide 14, they have absolutely no respect for the judgment of this other person, right? What we need is someone to affirm our stable sense of self so that we get the idea that we matter. First, we get this from our parents, then we're going to get it from others, right? You, Jesse, matter in the world. That's what I need. But if I'm forcing someone to tell me that, or if someone's telling me that doesn't really know me, or someone's telling me that I have absolutely no respect for, or they're telling me that about something I don't care about, I'm not going to get any genuine self-esteem about it. So I've got some examples there. If one of you emailed me right now and said, Jesse, Professor Bailey, you suck at playing basketball. Why is that? Am I not going to care? One, I'm not going to care because you don't know whether or not I play basketball well. Right? That's not going to hurt my self-esteem. Secondly, you may not be an expert on basketball. Right? You may not know. I don't respect your opinion about basketball playing. Even if you had seen me play, I might still say, I'm not harmed by that. But let's say you've seen me play. You know everything there is to know about basketball. You're the basketball master. And you tell me that. Why is it still not going to hurt me? It's not going to hurt me because I don't pride myself on it. Right? I don't care. It's not a source of my identity. It's not a source of my self-esteem. If one of you saw me play basketball and said, "You suck at basketball," you know my response would be, "You are damn right I do. I suck terribly. Yeah, it's awful. I suck." Not hurt. So these structures have to be in place for us to get self-esteem from the people around us. They have to know us. And this is a huge deal, right? Because especially for men, it's really, really, really hard for us to reveal ourselves, right? It's hard. Men are socialized to hide our fears. We're socialized to hide when we have weaknesses, when we're insecure about things, when we're scared and uncertain. We don't ask for directions, all those cliches, right? That's about, as a man, it's really hard to reveal your emotions. And if you don't reveal yourself, then people can't really know you. And so it's really hard to get self-esteem and to receive love if you're not revealing yourself, because then no one really knows you. They can't really love you. Secondly, the person that is judging you, you have to have respect for them. So the proper structured relationship, which we'll get to on 15 and 16, is to have a relationship in which you do not beat the other person down so that they're relying on you. What you want is someone that truly knows you and that judges you as valuable from being a completely confident and capable and self-assured individual. You need someone that you respect, that's stable, whose opinion matters to you, that isn't relying on you for something to tell you that you're good. So if I tell you, email me, Professor Bailey, you're a good professor, or I will fail you for this winter class. You may do it, but I'm not really going to get much out of it, because I know that I've forced you to do it, right? That I've got this weight hanging over your head. And so if I'm in a relationship with someone that's telling me I'm a great lover and a great husband and all these things, but she's actually just terrified because if I leave, she'll fall apart, that doesn't do me any real good, right? Because she's only she's not telling me that genuinely out of herself. She's doing it because she absolutely needs me. And so I may have good, so to speak, rational, so to speak, reasons for beating down my partner's self-esteem so that I get control and so that she'll come to rely on me and not leave me. But that actually ends up destroying the very structure of what I'm trying to get in this relationship, which is having an equal, a partner who I respect, tell me that I am awesome of their own free will. Does that make sense? Okay, so there's some relationship advice that comes from this, on how to support the self-esteem of the person that you're with. That's on slide 16. You just have to find ways to make them capable and strong and confident on their own. That has to be your goal. And then this has to be a mutual goal, right? She's also doing that for me, right? The other person is trying to find things about that matter to me, that make me feel confident, that make me feel strong, and she has to find ways to support that as I'm trying to support her. And so we're in this project of mutual recognition and mutual support that is the inner subjective goal of life, according to Russon, that we're trying to support one another in our things. Even if what she's doing, I don't really respect it, right? Like maybe she's into the ballet. I'm like, I'm not into ballet. I don't care about ballet. It'd be much better if you did martial arts. So you're going to come with me to martial arts class, and I'm going to be like helping you, right? That's just not respecting her, right? I have to find a way to support her in what she's doing. Okay, hopefully that all makes sense. So on page 60, this kind of comes together in this sense of what this goal is. And this goal is cooperation, right? These ideas of domination, these abusive, sadomasochistic controlling relationships fail to achieve the genuine goal of intersubjective contact. That our goal is to contact others in this cooperative way. Now he says that this structure, this is the paragraph at the bottom of 60, right? So that page 60 is very important. What he says is, this cooperation can be seen in a number of ways, and the most constructive and powerful of which will be the subject of study in Chapter 6, Philosophy. But primarily we see that such cooperation in the situation we recognize as a community. That is, collections of people adopting similar views about the order of things and consequently behaving toward each other out of a shared sense of what constitutes the reality of the world. So we're constituting a we. In living according to shared codes, each member of a group tacitly announces in its behavior that what it takes to be authoritative is what the others who share the codes likewise take to be authoritative. Those things, those rules which have authority and that should be binding and tell us how to think and what is real and what is true and what we should do and how we should behave and what men are like and what women are like, that's determined in the context of this cooperative we, right? In other words, by agreeing on a third thing, these rules, in this case, the principles on which our world appears to us to be organized, the codes that we accept as authoritative for governing our practices, etc. In agreeing on this thing, we agree with each other. In insisting on the authoritative character of the values that matter to oneself, one simultaneously acknowledges the authoritative character of what matters to the others. Right? So we agree on a set of principles. Right? That's our cooperative mission. We're trying to find a set of principles that we can agree on that will be authoritative for guiding our life. And us all agreeing to follow those sets of rules makes us a we. That's the we, that's the community, right? Now, most of the time, we're going to find that this takes the form of traditional societies in which we're forced to conform, just like a family, as opposed to each one of us being active participants. But this is why something like a philosophical community would be the highest form of this, because no one is being forced to think or believe anything. The principles on which rational discussion and interaction will be based is something that every individual affirms. Every individual will affirm on their own the cogito, right? Everyone, as an individual, will just come to the table and say, hey, let's cooperate on the basis of recognizing that each one of us is a conscious, rational being. And so what we're going to see is that each one of us has this whole new basis that's not for Russon simply the cogito, that's Descartes' basis. For Russon, he develops, and you'll see the last slide in this presentation, is characterizing finally how Russon points to what this rational basis is, which can be the foundation for all human communities, for all we's. Anyone of any religion, of any race, of any gender can agree that, hey, if they understand human experience, they can agree that, hey, we're all here struggling to find a stable sense of self. We're all here trying to have a sense of self-esteem and develop freedom and individuality and hopefully happiness, right? We're all on this mission, and this mission, this goal of intersubjective human life is cooperation. It cannot be fulfilled through domination. It cannot be fulfilled through simple traditional societies which enforce codes of behavior on us. It can't be created through totalitarian regimes which are repressive and demand that everybody behave exactly the same way and conform. Just those are all failures, even though it looks like everybody's agreeing. Right? Everybody in North Korea seems to agree that Kim Jong-un, the leader, is the greatest. And so, hey, everybody agrees, and therefore it's a fully formed we. Nope. That is the same structure as everyone in the relationship agreeing that the man is in charge and knows best, but it's only because he's abused her. Right? There's an inherent failure in that. There's an inherent failure to recognize this cooperative activity where free, rational individuals discuss and agree upon the principles of life. That path of sitting down and discussing and agreeing and seeking to understand one another is the path of intersubjective life. This is just what it means to go from being a private individual to being a fully fledged adult in society. Some social structures make this easier, some make it harder, but before we can see how this takes place in the family, and then that's the next section, right? This is page 61. This initially takes place in the family. That's our initial we, where we all agree on a set of authoritative rules. That family has a trajectory where it leads us to become adults. That adult life happens in society, and we see that these trajectories that are in every human life in greater and lesser, easier to see degrees, more difficult circumstances, every human life follows this pattern, and we're all seeking the same goal of self-esteem and a stable sense of who we are and being respected by those who we respect and care about their opinion, etc. That goal has to be the narrative on which we all sit around the table and say, how are we going to structure society? How are we going to develop a set of rules which we can all agree on as authoritative that are going to guide our behavior and guide our policy making? That has to come from this new cogito, this new foundation. Foundation is not simply my consciousness as existing, but rather it's my interpretive, embodied, temporal, interrelation with others. It's this whole structure he's been describing. And so when we get to page 72, we'll see this all come together. So I'm going to take a little pause right now. Hopefully the video